Dithda, as they say in my part of the world, and welcome from me, Martin Smith, aka Cornish Grandad, to my YouTube channel. I trust you're well and interested in learning how to improve the textures on our materials. So far, we've been working with a single workspace. Today, we explore the shader and the nodes. Nodes allow us to manipulate textures to make more complicated materials. We will demystify the daunting Principled BSDF shader that has replaced all previous shaders, and with a helpful Node Wrangler add-on enabled, create some wood materials for our kitchen furniture. So this is the scene we've got so far. Hopefully you added a bottle and some glasses to it. I think that looks pretty good. I think the jug looks pretty good. I love the reflections of this fruit bowl, and the plate and mug look pretty good. But I think the furniture looks pretty amateurish, almost, cartoonish perhaps. Very basic colours, as does the floor, which is supposed to be tiled. So today we're going to work on improving those. We've spent all our time so far in the layout editor, and as you remember right from the very first lesson, there are different layouts that we can use. I tend to work most of the time in one I've developed, which is the 3D viewport, which basically gets rid of the play bar at the bottom, gives you the maximum space to work with. There are all these other ones at the top, but the one we're going to work with most of the time today is the shading editor. So the shading layout, which basically gives you a form that looks something like this. There's your scene in the middle, which we can look at in preview mode, and we can zoom in on so we can have a look at it. We've still got most of our panels at the side the same. Your panels on this side might look slightly different. Don't worry about that for the moment. The key one we'll be working with is called the node editor. So if we select our fruit bowl, what you have here, and I've still selected the material panel here, by the way. You remember this material panel we created? We created basically a silvery fruit bowl. Let's zoom in a bit more. We created a silvery fruit bowl. We made sure it was metallic, and we made sure it was pretty smooth. And if you notice here, we've got what they call a node. This is the Principled BSDF node, and it mimics that. So we've got white, we've got metallic, and we've got the same roughness at 0.029 in my case. Yours might be slightly different. So this actually is a representation of this, or vice versa, whichever way you want to view it. Now, the Principled BSDF node, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, if you click on an edge and you get this double arrow like you do in most Windows applications, you can change the size of these. We'll go through reformatting these at some later state. It looks pretty complicated at first, so I have a quick slideshow here to actually show you that this isn't as daunting as you might first think. The Principled BSDF is a surface shader, and it's replaced all previous shaders. So when you create a new material, it will automatically be plugged into the surface input and the material output node. Let's look at this daunting array of inputs. The first two we can ignore. It's naturally where the colour goes. You can either click on the bar and the colour wheel will come up, and you can select a colour from that and then select how light or dark you want it, or you can type in an RGB, HSV or hex number, or use the little pipette to actually choose a colour from elsewhere. The next two are really only used when you've got light going through a surface and shining, and a common one we think of is the web between our fingers in a bright light. Metallic, so either 0 or 1, simple as that. If it's a metal, it should be 1. If it's not, it should be 0. Specular is correct at 0.5, so just leave it as it is. So if something's smooth, it should have a score of 0. If it's really rough, it should have a score of 1. Anything in between, obviously choose as you like. But you can also drive this input from another node. Different color reflections, rarely relevant. I've never used it. Sheen, think of satin material and it's got a very thin shine right on the top edge. Very rarely used. So you've got a clear coat such as on a car, or you've got a waxy coat on the top of a metal or any other lacquer on a piece of wood. Index refraction we covered in a previous lesson. So these three are only used if you've got a transmission object such as water or glass. Emission strengths is where it emits light. It could be a neon light, it could be a light particle that you've created, a volcano, whatever. But unless you're doing one of those, you're not going to use it. Alpha is where you get a translucent object, so an image or something you might put on as a translucent image. You put in a bump map, which is very small indentations on the surface, give it a bit of texture, that will feed into this one. And the last two I've never used in my life, so don't worry about them. There are only 5 that you need to worry about. 5 that we regularly use, so it's not as complicated or daunting as you would first think. So now let's look at the jug. And the jug has 2, which is weirdly laid out. Let's move these so you can see them both. Hold on. The water, if you remember, when we created it over here, we had the surface one as the Principled BSDF. Exactly the same settings there. And we also created a volume one, which we can find there, which is the volumed BSDF. And it's created these two and it's plugged them into this output. So in most cases, we'll have a material output node. And as you can see, it takes can take 3 different things into it. So surface, Principled BSDF surface shader has gone into that. And the volume has gone into that. And displacement, we haven't got a displacement applied to this. So a node, which is any of these, is a visual representation of a procedure. So it can take some various inputs and it has various outputs. So each of these input sockets can only take one input. But you can connect the output socket, which is on the right, to more than one if you wish to. You could, for example, take this output and plug it into there. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. You can see it has changed our material up there. And all I'm doing is clicking on that and dragging it and dropping it to there. So that's how I'm connecting the two up. Simple example of a node is, we'll quickly show you, this is a maths node. So maths node has 2 inputs. In this case, it's going to add the inputs together. So add input from there, an input from there, and it'll give you an output from there. So that's a simple example of a node. We can change this to a multiply, and it'll do exactly the same and multiply that value by that value and give you that value. We can manually type in a value if we want. So we could type in 0.25. That's fine. We can drag values in and out if we want, or we could feed it a value from somewhere else and it'll give me an output. Different color connectors, and generally speaking they can only be connected to their own color. So we have a yellow, and that's expecting a 3-color RGB input. We have grey, which generally expects a result between 0 and 1, but not always. And it's used for a lot of the inputs where you've got a grey colour scale. And we have blue, which is a better example is that one down there, which are vectors, so they're expecting an X, Y, Z input. And then finally we have green, which tend to be used for the connections between inputs and outputs. There is a add-on that comes with Blender, so it's perfectly safe to use, that makes connecting these up easier, and it's called the Node Wrangler. So let me show you how we set that up. So that's Edit, Preferences. So when you're in here, if you select Add-ons, type in this question in the search box, type in Node. There you've got Node, and there's Node Wrangler there. All you need to do is tick that box. That's all you need to do. Now the connectors between the various nodes, I think are called noodles. They can be left straight if that's how you like them, but if you want to make them curved, which I prefer, then you can go to Themes, Node Editor, scroll down to the bottom, and it says Noodle Curving. You type a number in. 4 is the number I work with, but obviously you can try something else. And when you were happy with that, just shut down the window. So now we have set our system up and we've loaded up the Node Wrangler. Let us improve on the tabletop, the mahogany color. So here's our Principled BSDF with its dark brown color. What we're first going to do is add some texture. So we can do add, search for noise, and there's a noise texture there. Click on that, drag that down. So if we take the color from here and stick into the color from here, take a little while for it up to date. This is the kind of thing we're going to get. And if we adjust the scale, and we adjust the detail, adjust the roughness, try the distortion, you can see what they're all doing. So the more distortion you get, the more wavy pattern you get. The higher the scale, the more detail you get on it. Now the actual numbers you pick is up to you. But that's what the noise texture is going to do. Now obviously we don't want a rainbow coloured top, so what we could do is add a colour ramp. There's a colour ramp, and if you drag it and drop it on the lines, it should all get connected up for you. So now it's gone to grayscale. You've got the same pattern, but you've got a grayscale, and the reason is that this colour ramp is going from white to black, back again. So you've got these little handles here. If you click on one, click on the black at the bottom, give it a bit of brightness, choose a browny, deep browny colour. If you click on the one at the other end, do exactly the same process. You've got a browny colour, but we'll have it lighter. You can see you're beginning to get some colour pattern up here. Now we can obviously adjust these colours. We might decide that we want this a bit darker, for example. And you're beginning to get the pattern. Now there is a very useful website, which is the Adobe Colours website, where you can actually pick colours up from. So I'll show that to you now. Here we have the Adobe Colours website. I shall put the URL into the description. If you click on Explore, then we have an option on this search bar to type in mahogany. And it brings you lots of different mahogany images you can choose from. I'm going to pick this one just because I feel like it. And notice you've got the hexadecimal codes for these different colors. So I'm going to pick this one to start with. So no, I'm going to pick the dark one to start with. I think I'll pick that one. So copy that, and then return into Blender. So if I make sure I've got my dark handle selected, select the color bar, go to the hex field, and then in there I can just type Control V, paste as you'd expect. And now I can pick the lighter color. I'm going to pick that, and then return into Blender. And then with the light color, obviously select the other end of the bar, select that, and I've got more realistic colors for my table now. Now if you want to darken or lighten these, you can move these bars up and down so you can get shades in between. Now what I want to do is I want to be able to make it more stripy, and the way to do that is if we click on a noise texture, and a Node Wrangler feature is Control and T, then we get these additional nodes up. We're not worried about the texture coordinate one at the moment, but the mapping one, we can change the direction of these if we wish to, but we can slide these up and down. I'm not going to bother. I'll reset that to 0. But we can make it more stripy by stretching one of the scales. So if we stretch that, you can see we're making the beams go across. If we do it the other way, if we do it on the x-axis, whoops, or if we go the other way, you can make it more stripy going that way. It's up to you. So I quite like that. But so we've got a nice stripy colored table. It looks mahogany, but it's very boring. It's very flat. It's like almost Formica. So what we need to do is add a bit of texture to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a bump into here. So if you go add, and we'll search for bump. Take a bump node, and we can connect the normal to the normal. And if we take the factor out of here, and we stick it into height, wait for Eevee to catch up. There we go, and you've suddenly got some texture in here. So we can adjust the strength if you wish, make it shiny or less shiny. You can adjust the distance if you wish, but I think that's a reasonable effect, don't you? So we've now modified our texture for the mahogany for the tabletop. So tabletop is now got all this texture in, and remember that we had our chair was connected to the same thing, so they picked up the same material. So we have a good basis for a wood material, a nice dark wood material. What we could do is we could duplicate this, which is hitting this little button here, and we could name this, I don't know, oak legs. Okay. And now we can pick 2 different colors here for our oak effect. And what I would like you to do now is pick the 2 colors for your oak effect from Adobe Colors. You've already got open, and then create a new wood material for your pine board, if you've got one for your breadboard. And hopefully I'll see you soon. Hope you've enjoyed and learned something from this tutorial on the shader material nodes. And if you have, then please support this channel by clicking like and subscribe. A link to the next node tutorial is available on the screen. Keep in touch, and I hope to see you soon.